Have you ever thought how Vergil would handle the fights that Dante went through within the Devil May Cry series? Stick around because we're going to go through all of them.
That's none of my concern.
To lay out exactly how this is going to work, I'm not just going to put end of Devil May Cry 5 Vergil against the beginning of Devil May Cry 3 Dante, because that would just be overkill. But what we are going to do is to have the closest version of Vergil face off against the different bosses and enemies that Dante had to fight. And we're going to try to keep him as close as possible until we finally get to the point where we have to pick the next level up of Vergil. So we start off in Devil May Cry 3 because timeline-wise, it's in the beginning, where originally Dante fights against Cerberus, Gigapede, and Jester, and some other bosses. Where we do know that Dante was able to defeat them, and the earliest version of Vergil that we meet already bodies the Dante that we meet at the beginning of the game, and already has a Devil Trigger ability. I mean, technically the youngest Vergil we have is when the Sparta twins are literally kids, and they're fighting with wooden swords, where I believe that Vergil as a kid would probably lose to the first Cerberus, but it's hard to say since Vergil was at a point where he ran away from home and had to fight off against skeletons from Mundus's forces. But even if the argument was made that child Vergil with his wooden sword beat Cerberus, this Vergil is going to lose to Devil May Cry 3 Dante, which would bring us to Devil May Cry 3 Vergil anyways. Let's continue on. So in the first fight between the brothers, we know that Vergil wins. Then they fight a second time and it's even. And then with this information, it would also show that Vergil wouldn't be able to defeat Arkham after he retrieves the Sword of Sparta. And it required both the Sparta twins to work together on defeating him. Then there is the obvious where Dante and Vergil fight, and we already know that outcome. But we are already on to the first Devil May Cry game.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
So the first boss that Dante originally fights is Phantom, the big spider scorpion lava thing. And we can keep the end of Devil May Cry 3 Vergil wielding Beowulf to absolutely obliterate Phantom in this fight on Melee Island. The next fight that happens is actually against Nelo Angelo, who is Vergil. Spoilers, sorry. And this is where I believe Devil May Cry 3 Vergil actually loses, as Dante is supposed to be stronger than Vergil at this point. At least that's how it shows at the end of the third game, right? So in the first fight that Dante has against Nelo Angelo, he actually loses, right? So Nelo Angelo originally defeated Dante at that point, and it only makes sense logically that Vergil from Devil May Cry 3 would also lose. So we're gonna have to pull up to Nelo Angelo, right? And it's gonna be a mirror fight. Let's just keep Nelo Angelo and we'll move through, right? So to continue on, we then have Nelo Angelo in mirror matches until Mundus. So this is the one that is probably going to be confrontational, but I do believe that Nelo Angelo loses against Mundus, and here's why. So at the end of Devil May Cry 3, Vergil goes off to fight against Mundus. We learned that in the Visions of V novels that Vergil would have won this fight, as Mundus hadn't recovered all of his power yet. Then Nelo Angelo had lost the two following fights against Dante, who would then go on to defeat Mundus in the underworld, but eventually would need the help of Trish when they returned back to the world of the living, or the human world, and then they would work together to seal Mundus away. Then my last main note on that is that Nelo Angelo doesn't even have the Yamato, which is pretty much one of Vergil's main sources of power. This will also lead us to an interesting point because, well, we don't see Vergil until Devil May Cry 5 again. Yeah, we see him in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, but this is before Nero is born, which would need to happen before Devil May Cry 3, since Vergil is without his Yamato, which is in a broken state, and we don't see Vergil for a significant amount of time in this series. So the next form that we would have to take on Mundus would be the same Vergil that is quite literally on the brink of death at the beginning of Devil May Cry 5, right before he finds Nero. So at this point, now I want you to think about this, because what I'm about to say may sound crazy, but this Vergil beats Mundus. Okay, hear me out. So Nero is the son of Vergil, and at this point in the series is equipped with the Yamato to further empower him. He uses his sword's power and was able to crush the Savior's head. This is where I insert the line that you've probably heard before if you've seen my other videos, but if you're new, I will share it again, where Dante muttered to himself that he believed Nero to be stronger than him, which is stated in Deadly Fortune. Now, this doesn't mean that Nero is more skilled or could beat Dante, but Dante also stated that he wasn't pulling any punches on Nero when the two fought. But what made the disparity in their fights so significant was Dante's actual combat experience, along with his strength. And don't forget, this is the same Dante that destroyed Void Mundus in the Devil May Cry 2 novel, who was even more powerful than the one we see in the first game, along with a power that is relative to the original Mundus, Argisax. So Digital, are you saying that Nero would be able to defeat Mundus? Why yes. Yes, I am. That's more called out in my Nero video, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend you check it out. So to circle back to the original point though, we know how much power Nero wields, and with the fun fact that Vergil just walks up and rips the Devilbringer arm off of Nero as casually as Fury's body me in Dante Must Die mode in Devil May Cry 5, I am going to die on this hill and continue on. This is where normally I would mention Chen the Cannibal and Argisax, but I believe that is pretty well covered considering I just made the claim that Vergil at beginning of Devil May Cry 5 could beat Mundus, where I also think he could defeat Argisax in that case. But you know what? Let's actually have fun on that. So I believe that Chen would give this already dying Vergil some trouble. But this would only be because of the beast heads, which, if you know anything about the Devil May Cry 2 novel, is essentially the entire story. The beast heads grant the wielder, after consuming it, with infinite knowledge and the ability to see all potential futures. Even Dante in the Devil May Cry 2 novel struggled against Chen, and would have a limb broken. The ace that Chen has is that any amount of time that Chen can prolong the fight to have Vergil actually die, then Vergil loses. This is because Vergil was in a rush to retrieve the Yamato so that he could split his human and demonic side. With Chen's knowledge, he would know this and actually has a chance. But again, I'm leaning towards Vergil's ruthlessness to simply end this quickly. Just how Dante was able to cut down Chen even with all of these hacks. I think that unintentionally covered the end of Devil May Cry 1 into 2 and then into 4. Anyway, let's continue on to Devil May Cry 5 then. So before the Nightmare novel, Dante goes off to fight Balrog, which is why he is wielding that weapon at the beginning of Devil May Cry 5, who is the new king of the Fire Hell, which is because Dante defeated Burial from Devil May Cry 4, who was the original one, along with Balrog being a lieutenant of Argisax. So at the beginning of Devil May Cry 5 Vergil, I think he's also going to defeat Balrog, and we can continue on. So Dante then goes on to face Urizen, and as we all know, he gets bodied. So from this point on, it's pretty much mirror matches with himself through the different forms, eventually leading to exactly what we saw in the game. But by the end of the game, the brothers are equal in power. So I think that kind of summarizes everything, right? Devil May Cry 5 is pretty much two different forms of Vergil, and I could just keep having them match up and match up and match up. But that's how I see it. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.